Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. Great to have you with us. I can see a few people all joining in now. We're honoured to have you as part of this. This is our 70th podcast, and we decided to give it a try by doing it on Facebook Live. So this is our very first Facebook Live. So welcome everybody. Delighted that you could join us. And what we wanted to do this week for this first Facebook Live is to do a mini-series, actually. So this is the first part of a number of episodes where we wanted to discover a little bit more about what the low seasons have to offer in the continent of Africa, a continent which is often overlooked by travellers, and a continent which actually, I was reading this morning on the BBC, has suffered least of all of the continents when it comes to coronavirus. So a great opportunity. Now, obviously at Low Season Traveller, we focus on the low seasons in each of the different destinations. And therefore, what better starting point for our journey than to go to South Africa, where, of course, the winter in South Africa is right now, during the high season in Northern Europe. So we thought we'd feature South Africa for our very first episode. So you're all very welcome. To get us in the mood, I thought we'd start off just by showing you a little bit of an overview as to what South Africa has to offer. So with that, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a flavor of what we're going to be talking about and the part of the world that we're going to be talking about in this episode. I'd also like to point out at this point that our episode this week has been very kindly sponsored by the guys at Africa Roam. Now, Africa Roam is a renowned African tour operator offering travelers access to some of the continent's most exclusive and unique experiences. From unattainable culinary opportunities to behind-the-scenes access to art and culture, adrenaline-based adventures, access to the top safari guides, or the majesty of the natural wonders, the team at Africa Roam tailors every trip to exceed their guests' requests. And it's thanks to Africa Roam that we've been able to bring this episode for you today. So let's move on with the show. Part of what we wanted to discuss is about the coastal part of South Africa, as well as obviously the safaris, which are famous for. And our guest this morning, who I will introduce you to shortly, he's actually based out on the coast. So just to show you where he's located, I thought we'd show you a very short video, which just shows the Cape Peninsula. So that gives a little bit of a flavour there for the Cape Peninsula itself. So let's move on to today's guest. We have with us, and we're very proud to have, thanks to our friends at Africa Rome, we've got Warren Pearson with us. Now, Warren is a specialist natural guide. He's an explorer. He's a photographer. He's a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. He's done projects with Animal Planet and National Geographic. He's been on safari and indeed worked throughout the continent of Africa. And we're really privileged and honored to have Warren with us today. So let's bring Warren onto the show, and let's hear from him and see what he's got to say. So Warren, are you there? Let's get you here.
Good afternoon, Jed. Can you hear me?
We can, and we can now see you as well. How are you?
Good to see you, Jed. I'm very well, thank you. And you? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good indeed. Thank you very much. So is that where you're based? Are you based out on the coast there? Whereabouts are you now? Just so we can build a picture for everybody at home.
I'm very close to where you were watching now. I'm probably about 20 minutes away from Hermanus, which is known as probably one of the best whale watching places in the world. So yeah, the coastline is very close to me, and a place that I love to explore.
Very good, very good. So did we do you justice in our intro there? Tell us a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to be the expert in wildlife that you are. Give us a little bit of an overview.
Yeah, thank you for your amazing intro. You got me blushing a bit there. I've been in the industry over about 20 years now. I started in late 1999, and I started off guiding at a safari lodge in the Greater Kruger National Park. And the company that I was with actually managed lodges all over Africa. So I very quickly got my sort of foot in the door and asked them, I want to go and manage there. I want to go and work there. I want to go and see this place, go see that place. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So yeah, did that for close on probably 8-9 years. And then went on my own and started private guiding. So I had a lot of clients that came back to me and said, listen, we want you to guide us. Where would you recommend we go? What do you want to do? So yeah, for the last, well, probably I'd say now close on 12 years, 8 years, maybe, I'm sorry, 12, 11 years, I've been doing it on my own, working with amazing companies like Africa Rome and putting trips together and leading them.
Very good. And is this something that you wanted to get into as a kid? Were you like a lot of little boys are, going outside in the garden and, pretending that you're out in the wilds?
Yeah, as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be out in nature. And I would also, we often had a family little dispute every time we went on holiday, because my sister always wanted to go to the coast. I always wanted to go to the bush. So my parents are sort of pulled both sides saying, well, where do we go? So I was happiest in the bush. And my grandfather spent probably 5-6 times a year. He would be traveling to the Greater Kruger National Park, and I always wanted to go with him. He was a big birder, he was a big photographer. So I think that's where I sort of got my major, if I can say, crush and love for the bush.
Yeah, very good, very good. So I suppose let's start off. We're talking about low season in South Africa. I suppose the starting point very naturally has to be, when is the low season in South Africa? Am I right in saying it's our summertime, your winter time?
Yeah, well, I think you got to split the country up in two sections. I think that's probably the most important part of it. And I don't know if you can, one of those pictures maybe I sent you, the rainfall zones. Do you have it there? I can just quickly show you.
Do.
It just gives you an idea of those that are watching and even hearing. Exactly. So if you look at the sort of the southwestern tip there where Cape Town is, it's got a Mediterranean climate. So the rains come during the winter time, our winter time, so in the southern hemisphere. So that would be anywhere from sort of end of March to September, where the rest of the country, that sort of darker red period, because that's where all the majority of the safari lodges are and national parks, their low season would be obviously opposite that to what's in Cape Town. So their sort of low season months would be November to May. They do have periodic thunder showers and thunderstorms, and so you got to try and work your way around that and understand how the climatology works, I think, on the country, because it is quite a large country. So if you're talking about Cape Town specifically, then we're looking end of March to September when the rains come. And I always laugh because you get a lot of South Africans that will say, don't go to Cape Town in the winter because it rains all the time. I'm like, I'm looking outside now, it's 25 degrees centigrade, middle of our winter, and it's a beautiful blue sky. So, we
25 degrees is as good as we get here, Warren, just so you know that.
I'm only wearing a jumper because I'm inside my office at the moment. But it's stunning. And we do have periods where it will rain and it will be wet for a couple of days maybe. And then it clears up to the most spectacular of sunshine and days. And, if you've had a big cold front, there's snow on the mountains and it's beautiful. It's absolutely spectacular to see. And so many people miss that. Because they don't come down to Cape Town in this so-called low season, and the opposite for the bush and the safari lodges and that side of the country, because the low season is typically summer for them, for us, I should say, and November to May, and it is hot. You will get the odd rain shower, but at the end of the day, it's a spectacular time to be. There's not a lot of people there. You get all the sightings and more that you could sometimes wish for when you're here in peak season. So to me, you're actually missing out a lot when you miss low season in South Africa.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, we wanted to focus having an expert like you on the show, and we're grateful to Africa Roam for having you. But we wanted to focus on the wildlife side of things and the safari side of things. And I suppose I just wanted to sort of allay one of the fears. I feel like one of the fears for people who are considering a safari is if you go in the low seasons, the reason it's the low season is, you're not going to see anything for whatever reason. And that's why you have to kind of stick to the high seasons. And that's why the high seasons are the high seasons, because you see the most wildlife. Is that true? Is that a fallacy? What's the story with that?
It's partly true, if I can sit on the fence a bit here. If you're going into a national park, and it's a national park that, let's take, for example, the Kruger National Park. Now, Kruger National Park has private lands sort of surrounding its sort of western borders. It also has certain private concessions within the Kruger National Park. But if you're going along as an individual and you're driving yourself through Kruger National Park, in summertime and low season, it can be a little bit more difficult to find the animals because the bush is thicker. It's the rainy season. It's stunningly green, leaves on all the trees and the bushes. There's water scattered all over the place. So it does make it a little bit more difficult. But don't get me wrong, you're going to see a lot of animals still. There will still be stuff out there. It's not like they hide away in the bush and you don't see them. I think why people sell our winter time as the highest sort of point for safari would be there's no leaves on the trees, or most of the trees have lost their leaves. The bush is a lot thinner. So it's easier to just spot an animal. So when you're driving around, just to look through the bush and see it. But if you're going to a safari lodge that has expert guides, that have expert trackers, that can track an animal, get on foot, track these animals down, drive off-road, you're going to see as much in our low season as you will in the high season. A lot of people say it's exceptionally hot and humid, but it doesn't change the experience at all. It's sad that people only sell typically, or not say only sell, most of the time will only sell the low season, the high season, so our winter period. I love our rainy season, and the migratory birds are back. The bush is an emerald green. I actually call it the emerald season because it is so beautiful. And a lot of people come here when they do come in our summer, and they say to us, "It's so green. I didn't expect it to be so green." I think these natural pictures of Africa and the savannas and as being just khaki browns and those kind of colors is what people perceive it to be. But no, it's. I don't think you're going to see any less animals. If you go to the right place and you choose the right place to do it and how to do it, you got the right people on the ground. It helps.
Certainly, I suppose we spoke before off air. We were sort of talking, and I was telling you how the first time I did a safari, and in fact, it's the only sort of safari that I did, was a number of years ago, and I wasn't. I've always been interested in wildlife, but I was never particularly, it was never a big bucket list item for me was to go on safari. And maybe there's going to be a lot of people watching and listening to this program who've never even considered a safari. And for me, it was only when I went through. It was work, bizarrely, which sounds like a great work, doesn't it? I was bringing a group of travel agents to experience a safari, but it's only because I went with work that once I was there, I just got it. And like you were saying there, during the low seasons, you're going to see wildlife. It's not like you're not going to see anything. And do you find that that people, it's only when they actually go on safari for the first time that they get it, and it just starts to ring true? Is that your experience from the people that you meet?
Absolutely. I mean, I call it the aha moment. People literally go, "Whoa!" It's like aha, and they. I think if a trip is sold correctly, I think, and the expectations are met from the very beginning, that to me is probably the most important part of any travel anywhere in the world, actually. And if you're speaking to someone that's an expert of Africa, who lives in Africa or travels Africa, those expectations are met in the beginning. People are going to go, hang on, why haven't I been coming sooner? Why have I only coming now? I've had so many clients of mine that, sadly in their 70s and 80s, and you see them at the end of the trip and like looking quite down, and I'm like, well, are you okay? They said, it's just our time's running out, and we want to come back, and we want to see more, and we want to see more. And they just said, we just wish we could have known about this 20 years ago, to come. And to me, it's people come for the wildlife, and it's a huge part of it. And something that I try and push a lot is it's more than just the wildlife. And when you get to Africa, you're going to really understand that the wildlife is that nice little sort of section that, you got to come and see and experience. But when you come and see the scenery, when you come and see and meet the people and the local people on the ground, the tribes, it's a bigger picture. It's huge. And then people they just get it. They're just like, okay, I've got to come back. And I'd probably say the majority of all the trips that I lead and guide, probably close on maybe 70, 80, probably even 90% do come back, because it's like, first of all, it was my one and only trip. At the end of the safari, we're coming back, and where are we going to book it again? So absolutely, they do get that get it moment.
I suppose as well, potentially the for a first timer on safari, again, if you're not sure what to expect, given that during the low seasons it tends to be a little bit less expensive as well, it could be a good introduction for people, for the first time. Come during the low season, because once you're going to see wonderful wildlife, you're going to experience the culture, you're going to learn a lot about South Africa, but also you're going to want to come back anyway, no matter what. So why not just as a sort of relatively low risk, so to speak, come during the low season and get a taste for it, right?
No, absolutely. And the sad thing that I often see is that people, when they sort of do a bit of research about safaris, and you find a lot of people do a little bit of their own research, they'll get online and get onto Google or wherever it might be, and have a look at, when the first thing they type in probably most of the time is, when is the best time to go? And majority of the websites will all give you, well, high season, and it's okay, well, let's book, and it's maybe 4 or 5 months out. And if you want to go on a safari anywhere in Africa, you have to book at least a year to 2 years out if you want to go in the high season. And in the low season, it's space is available, the rates are cheaper. You will see as much and experience as much in that period of time. And I think the most important thing when you're coming in the low season is just to have a very flexible attitude and sort of, if I can say itinerary, but just a way of moving around and saying, hey, listen, if it's raining today, well, we were going to do that, but we're going to try something different and we're going to do that. So yeah, being flexible and understanding that is a huge part of traveling. And I think those adventurous kind of travelers that like to, stay away from the crowds, and I'm one of those. If there's a whole bunch of vehicles going left, I'm going to be that one and only car that's going to go to the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of people that if you want to experience no crowds in some places, in some parts, you'll have a national park all to yourself. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I mean, I was in a part of Africa last year in the low season. I was literally the only guide in that area.
Wow.
So yeah, people miss out sadly a lot, and I'm so glad that we're able to chat about this, because it's something that's very close to my heart, is getting people to travel, all around the year. Actually, it's you just got to be able to come and do it.
I must admit, I mean, obviously, with a company like Low Season Traveller, I'm the same, and yeah, I'm exactly that way. If all of the crowd are going one way, I'll literally go the opposite direction. And if they tell me, you've got to go to this place and everybody's going, I'm going the other direction with a sense of adventure, thinking great. And if they tell me, you'd be crazy to go at that time of the year, that's like a red rag to a bull, frankly. If they tell me you'd be crazy to go at that time of the year, I'm thinking, okay, but I need to look into this now, and I think that's the way in which, that's the way Low Season Travellers, that's the mindset. It's that, we always say that the days of Marco Polo and, discovering new countries and new destinations have gone, but you can still get that sense of adventure and the adrenaline and that bit of excitement when you're traveling somewhere at a time when most people don't travel. You can still have that kind of excitement. I think that's what what appeals to me, certainly, and I know it appeals to a lot of our audience as well.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about the sort of the safari experience. And again, just for all of our listeners out there and our viewers out there, when we talk about a safari, but break us down. What is the tip? What's a typical experience? What's a typical day like when you're with your client? Is there a typical day, broadly speaking? But what's it like when you're there with your clients?
Every day, I mean, everyone says, comes to me and says, do you have a plan for the day? And I'm like, I sort of have a plan, but typically when you head out and within the last sort of first 5 minutes, that plan changes completely. So every day is different, and that's the excitement of a safari, is that it's an open book. You never know what you're going to find and explore and see, but typically it's a very early start. So if you're a morning person, fantastic. If you're not a morning person, it's fine. I've learned to understand not to talk to people before sort of 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, really?
But it's you need to be an early riser. Sunrise is even better, because if you're out there and you're watching that sunrise in the morning and you get out to a specific spot, wherever it might be, and you will just take the time to watch a sunrise. And people don't do that, I feel, often enough. They don't sit and watch a sunrise, or they don't watch a sunset. People are often rushing at that time of the morning or the evening to do other things. So just get out and just listening to the sounds of what's out there. Maybe there was lions calling in the night before, or a leopard calling close to the camp, or not. It's just head out and go and experience nature and the bush. And it's, as I said, it's one thing I love about it is that you just don't know what you're going to find. I have had clients in the past that have said to me, so what are we going to see today? I'm like, I have no idea. It's that's part of the fun is heading out there and let's see what tracks we find on the ground. Let's see what other animals are doing. There's if you know how to read the bush and listen to the sounds and the tracks, it will lead you places, and it leads you into the most amazing sightings that you could possibly have, if you have the patience and the understanding of wanting to do that. So to me, it's getting out and taking it slow and not racing from one big sighting to another big animal over here to there or to wherever, because you end up racing around and as we call in the safari industry having a bit of a Ferrari safari, which is not fun for most people. So yeah, it's early start, head out, normally warm up a bit. When it warms up a bit, you sort of stop for a cup of coffee or hot chocolate. Sometimes you don't even have to stop, if things are really happening. And that's the other side of it, is we're out there to look for wildlife and enjoy nature. We don't always have to stop for the typical sundowner or coffee stop in the morning. But it is nice to actually just stretch the legs every now and again. And then typically head back to the camp for a late lunch, early lunch, late breakfast. And for me specifically, if people are traveling with me, we don't want to be confined to what the camp or the lodge does. So you've got to be back for breakfast at 8 o'clock. It's no rubbish. We come back when we want to come back, because this is why we're here. We're here to find the animals. So that time could be 9 o'clock in the morning, it could be 12 o'clock midday, who knows? Sometimes we're actually out all day. And if that happens, we make sure that we arrange a picnic or something like that will come out with us. And then typically, if you do head back to the camp, we follow the Spanish system of having a good afternoon siesta.
Love that.
Most of the animals, typically during the heat of the day, and even in our winter, the heat of the day, it does get quite warm in places. So typically around 12 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon you have a bit of downtime at the camp. And then we'll head out again anytime from 3-4 o'clock onwards. And depending on where we are, and depending on where you are in Africa, is you can sometimes spend out later at night and do the night safari, or depending on the camps, you have to be back in camp. So as I said, depending on a national park or a private concession. So to me, spending out at night, it's exciting, it's fun. It's a completely different experience when you got this blackness that surrounds you, the stars open up above your head, and you got a open vehicle, and there's a spotlight being shone around, and you're looking for nocturnal animals that are active at night. That's another exciting part of it. And I forgot actually the sunset. So getting out there and actually watching a sunset is spectacular. And that's it. Then we head back to camp, typically at around, it could be any time, we don't really get back too late, but I would say probably around 8 o'clock at night, 7, 8 o'clock at night. For me, I love being out at night. It's the Milky Way galaxy that just lights up the world, and it's spectacular, and to learn about the constellations and the stars. And one thing that I will never ever forget is probably in my early days of guiding, I had a gentleman, I think if I remember correctly, I'm talking a good probably 15, pushing maybe 18 years ago. This gentleman came out from New York, and we went out and we were driving around, and we ended up stopping quite late, and we had a drink, stop quite late. And we stayed there until it got pitch black. And next minute, I said, just look up at the stars. And everyone was quiet. And the next minute, I heard this gentleman crying. And I was like, what? Are you okay? And he just said to me, I've never, ever seen stars like this ever in my life. He says, I've grown up and lived my entire life in New York City, and this is the first time I've seen something like this. And that hit me. It hit me like, whoa, this is something very special for me and for people that come out here. Take the time to just, we're there to look for animals and stuff, but the stars and the sounds, and just take it slow. And ever since then, I've always looked up at the stars, and I think of that gentleman every single time I look up.
It's true, isn't it? Though sometimes it's the simple things that that I guess we all take for granted at different times. I can remember years ago living in Dublin myself, and I was living right in the city centre of Dublin, and I remember going weeks, months without seeing really any sort of green, rolling hills, trees, all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's parks in Dublin, but it was only then when I went out to the countryside, and you're like, I kind of missed looking. I know it sounds bizarre, but when you're in a city, you everything that you're looking at is in relatively close proximity. So you're surrounded by buildings, and it's close proximity, and it's actually quite stressful on the eyes. And it's when you go out into the countryside or out into the bush, when you're looking vast distances, there's something relaxing about that. But also, you get to see more sky. And just a simple thing like like these big African skies which you get to see and experience, whether it be at nighttime or during the day, it's something pretty special, actually, especially when you don't get it, as we tend not to here.
No, absolutely. And I think what a lot of people, especially if I can say Northern Hemisphere and people that travel to Africa, the majority of them are in big cities and can't see that far. And I go to some places, for example, in the Kalahari, where it's so open and almost so flat, you can see the curvature of the earth just from an elevated position that you're looking at. It's one of the other things I love about the low season on safari in South Africa is why people stay away is the thunderstorms and the rain that we get. And to me, there's nothing more spectacular than sitting out in the open and watching this magnificent lightning storm and thunderstorm happening around you. And it might come across and might hit you, and we might get a little bit wet, but that's the experience. And after a thunderstorm happens and the rain clears away, the light that comes out from a photographic perspective, and not even from a photographic perspective, just from taking it in, is just I get goosebumps just thinking about it, because it is absolutely mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I must admit I'm exactly the same when it comes. I mean, again, it's similar with the low seasons in parts of the Far East, and the Caribbean, where they have these tropical downpours. And for me, I just absolutely love that. And like you were saying, if you're sitting on your porch or whatever else, and you're watching that storm roll in, and you're seeing fork lightning all around you, I mean, that's you are watching the beauty of nature at its most ferocious. I absolutely, I could kind of be addicted to that, to be honest. I really quite enjoy it.
No, absolutely. And I think I agree, and I think a lot of people forget about nature and that part of nature. It all makes, for me, it makes us realize where we fit into this world and how small we actually are when you watch this massive thunderstorm come through. The power of that storm, and just you watch the animals take it all in. You see the bush come alive afterwards. It's absolutely spectacular.
It truly is. What I wanted to do at this point, Warren, if it's okay, is I wanted to show. Again, for all of our viewers out there, not so much the listeners on the podcast, sorry about that, listeners, but I wanted to show a video, which is from Kruger, I believe, and I thought afterwards we might have a little bit of a chat about what we're seeing in the video, if that's okay, Warren. So this is a little bit of a sample as to what the safari experience is in South Africa. So that's is that a pretty good depiction as to the kind of experiences which you can have?
Absolutely. It gives a good sort of idea. I think people looking at that will probably have a lot of questions about a few things, and this is where I think the pre-build up to a safari is very important in expectations and matching and meeting expectations for people. So no, absolutely, it gives a pretty good idea what happens out there.
We spoke about this briefly off air, but in one of the images there, you could see that there's a very small seat at the front of the safari vehicles, and you would say, now that's for spotters, is it?
Trackers.
Okay, so, let's get the lingo here now. What's the difference between a spotter and a tracker?
All right. So typically a spotter is a gentleman that will sit at the back of a vehicle and just spot animals. So looking for animals. You'll find after a few days of being, and I mean, if you come from your home and you come out for a few days, your eyes won't get sort of used to what you're looking at, and you won't necessarily see everything. Whereas someone that's grown up in the bush has been there for a very long time, their eyes are more attuned to seeing certain things. Now, spotters can be fantastic, but to me, what's even better is to have someone sitting on the front of the vehicle, that seat that you saw, and that's a tracker. Now, a tracker is someone that I have probably the most unbelievable respect for. They have an art and it's a skill that they've grown up learning to how to track an animal by looking at signs around what the bush is giving you. And typically it's footprints on the ground, but it could be a smell. It could be definitely your eyesight. It could be the way that a tree has been eaten, for example. And that person on the front of their vehicle, to me, brings a safari alive, if you let them. Now, when I say if you let them, there are unfortunately so many guides out there that don't, I feel, give the trackers enough credit for what they do, because they are some phenomenal men and women. And it's if you give them the time, and I've always said this to every single client of mine, if you give them the time and if you have the patience, if they find a fresh track, if it's a leopard or if it's a lion, could be a rhino, it could be whatever animal, and they're excited about it, and they know that track is going to lead them to find an animal, let them go. And we just sit back and we watch this unfold in front of us. And that, to me, is probably one of the most exciting, exhilarating experiences anyone could have, is to see this man or woman finding this tiny little track, which you look at the ground, you're going to go, what are you looking at? Because I can't see anything. I just see a whole bunch of marks and mess. And this person will literally find this animal and track it down. And to me, that is a skill that is, not a lot of people know about, sadly, and it is sadly, it's a dying art. And there are a few organizations and companies around Africa that are trying to keep that art going. And for me, having guests sitting on a vehicle and being taught how to track an animal is then I'm happy. If people want to sit down with me and we go through that kind of stuff, and they talk to the tracker and the tracker gets involved, it opens up a new window into your world.
It's almost like a different like language that they understand. They're able to interpret what they see around them. And I suppose you or I, maybe more me than you, would literally just, like you say, see bush or whatever else. But you almost need a good tracker around to be able to, to interpret that, to help you to understand what you're looking at and what you might be leading towards, I guess.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree. And, I've often been out on a vehicle, and a comment will be thrown to me from people in the vehicle saying, there's no animals around. And the first thing I do is I stop the vehicle, I get everyone out, I say, come, let's look at the road in front of us. And you look at the track, and it's literally, this animal walked here last night, there's that little animal, that one's walked there, that one's walked there. The next minute, hang on, there's probably a good maybe 20 odd different species of animals that have walked this road, in the previous evening, going back. So it's just, you need someone to interpret that bush experience and that wildlife experience. And it does, if you have someone, and a tracker and a guide that work very well together, to me it's the best recipe that you could ever have. And you'll never forget that trip, because the tracker is interpreting the bush, and the guide is interpreting that to the clients, and explaining it on a bigger scale. So you need a tracker in the bush. And unfortunately, as I said, it's a dying art, and I just wish there were more of them out there, and people would be amazed. And those people that are, if they're listening to this, or watching it and have experienced something like that, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, you have to experience it to know what I'm talking about. It's something that just gets you, it gets to your core. It's something that is just so real.
It was interesting, actually. Again, we spoke about this when we sort of caught up last week. and we spoke about it briefly off air. But as well, I suppose it's similar with interpreting the sounds of the bush, right? I mean, that must be a similar skill. Because I'd made the mistake when I was first talking about, when I knew I was going on safari, is imagining this, it's like in the countryside in the UK when when you get out at nighttime, it's deathly silent, and it's the first time you can hear nothing. And there was people that were pulling me up left, right, and center saying, it's really not necessarily very quiet here. And we were going to have a clip to show the viewers that are on with us today, just exactly how loud it can be at nighttime, but unfortunately the video wouldn't work at the very last minute. But describe to us some of those kind of sounds that you hear at nighttime as well, and how you can kind of interpret those sounds.
I'm not the best person to try and interpret animal sounds, but I'll give it a go. But you're 100% correct there, because I mean I worked at a camp in the Serengeti, for example, and I know we're talking about South Africa, but I just want to quickly explain this. It was a tented camp, and I often used to say to the guests that arrived, don't be afraid if on the first night you don't sleep well, because you're going to hear so much noise. There are hippos that are going to be chewing grass right outside your tent. You're going to be hearing lions roaring. You're going to be hearing the wildebeest, the zebras. It's a constant cacophony of just sound. And I often wish I was sort of lying next to them saying, listen to that, that's this one, that's what animal that is. Because it would open up their world to knowing what is around them. And a lot of people do get freaked out, specifically on their first trip to Africa, when they don't know what the sounds are. But probably the most vocal of animals in Africa, I'd say, is the hippopotamus. All day, all night, and if you are camping or sleeping anywhere close to a water source, you're going to hear them. That's a given.
Really?
I don't know if I can give you it's a very loud, like an old man grunting there all day, all night. But then, if you got your ears attuned, lions roaring, they don't growl as in sort of all the time, but they give this very deafening kind of going out. Leopards, funny enough, give sounds off that you would not recognize at all. It sounds like a blunt saw cutting through wood. So it's a very much of a what else? Nightjars. I mean, the nocturnal birds, for example. I mean, that to me is probably one of the most. Whenever I hear a nightjar calling, I know I'm in the bush. It's just, I mean, I have them close to my home where I live here, but when I'm out there and I hear that, it's special. Hyenas, another big one. I'm sure those that have seen Lion King and stuff sort of have this perception of a hyena, and it's my number one goal is to get people to absolutely love and adore hyenas by the time that they leave Africa, because they are such amazing animals. But they have this very whooping kind of woo kind of call that goes through, and sometimes if they get excited, they get this little cat.
Yeah. You still there, Warren? I think the screen's frozen. Can you still hear me, Warren? Well, there we go. Our first Facebook Live, and we've got our first technical hitch. Let me see if Warren is there. Oh, you're back, Warren? Can you hear me? Sorry about this, everybody. Hello, Warren? Oh, I think we might have lost Warren. Okay, we're going to try and get Warren back, but in the meantime, we're just going to show you this video on South Africa, the one that we showed you before. I'm so sorry. I should have had a new one already prepared, but we'll just show you this in the meantime, and I'll try and get Warren back. Okay, I think we've got Warren back. 3, 2, 1. Warren, come back to us. Where did you
Sorry,
go?
guys. Don't know what happened there. Apologies for that.
No, you don't need to worry. No apology necessary. I had heart failure, of course, being the host without a guest, but that's okay. We have these technical difficulties sometimes. It's just sod's law that it would be the first one. That was basically all my fears, Warren. All my fears of all morning have just
I know.
True. Listen, I wanted to get onto a little bit more about when we're talking about camp. And we're talking about tents. For anybody out there that's not familiar with what we're talking about, for me as a kid, and even a grown up, going out and getting a tent is, it's just a small triangular thing that 3 of us fit in, and you're relatively open and exposed. When we talk about camping in Kruger and places like that, describe it for us, just for those that aren't aware of it.
It's glamping, not camping. So it's glamorous camping, and the tents are big. They're spacious. 99% of the tents have ensuite bathrooms, showers, hot water showers. Depending where you are, some of them will be a bucket shower, but it's hot water. You have, for example, solar heating in a lot of the tents, and lighting and that kind of stuff that will help out. So yeah, it's not what I even have friends that say, when I say I'm camping, they go, well, why are you camping in a small little, like 3x2 bow tent? It's not that at all. I mean, you can go and do that if you want to go do that on your own in some of the national parks that have campsites.
Mm-hmm.
But for most part, the camping and the tents that we talk about are big, massive. I mean, I look at some people's apartments that are friends of mine, for example, in New York, it's bigger than their apartment. So yeah, it's you have a canvas wall, and a lot of people get very nervous for the canvas wall. The animals don't see it as canvas; they see it as a solid object. And inside that tent, you are 100% safe. The only sort of advice I always give to people is don't leave the tent open. So don't leave it unzipped. And that's, if you're going to leave it open or unlocked or anything like that, then you got a chance of something maybe coming in. But when you're there, keep it closed. When you leave, keep it closed. And it's probably one of the best experiences out there, because once again, you'll hear so much more than being in a solid structure. And to me, that's the best part about being out there, is listening to what's around you.
Yeah, absolutely. What about this? Sounds like a daft one, but this was my wife was saying, do you have to check your shoes really carefully in the mornings? What kind of small creatures do we have? We always talk about nature, and when we're talking about Kruger and safaris, there's all this focus. It's always about it's the big 5, and it's about seeing elephants, and about seeing lions, and all this kind of stuff. Talk to us a little bit about some of the smaller creatures that we should also watch out for.
No, it's a good point, Jed. I mean, for me, the smaller the better. It's not that I don't love the big animals, but when you start understanding the smaller insect life, if I can put it like that, and in the smaller brackets, I'm going to put insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds. It opens up another page, and you look at this and you go, hang on, there's if we're not seeing a herd of elephants, or we're not looking at a crowd of lions, there's still so much more to look at and to experience and to learn about. People come and they say, oh, but we don't like the creepy crawlies, we don't like the bugs. And I don't want to be sort of say this incorrectly, but that is Africa, and it's not just Africa, but it's any wilderness area that you're going to get around the world. You're going to get insects and scorpions and spiders, and yeah, I mean, it's to me, maybe for me it's different to other people around the world, but to me it's common sense. If you put your shoes down and you wake up in the morning, I still, to this day, when I'm at home here, I tap my shoes and I check if there's anything inside of it. It's just a habit to get into. I've had a scary experience where I've had a frog inside my shoe. I didn't know it was a frog at the time. But I didn't check my shoe. I put my foot into the boot, and there was a frog inside my boot. And I don't want to say I squealed, but I probably did a bit of a squeal.
It's probably one of those things you're only going to do once. If you're out in the bush, you're only going to not check your shoes once, and once that doesn't work out for you, you'll never do it again. You'll check your shoes every time, I reckon.
Exactly. So, when you start getting someone that really understands insect life, and just as I said, it opens up a whole new world for you. And I don't know, I walk around sometimes going, I don't want to step on this, this grass or this ground, because there could be animals under here that I'm going to be hurting or crushing their homes with. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more out there than the big animals, and if I can get people to understand the smaller stuff as well. One of my favorite animals, probably most people have never heard of, or maybe they have after this pandemic that's been around, and that's a pangolin. That to me is my most ultimate favorite animal. Very hard to find, but it's small, it's tiny, and most people have never heard of a pangolin, let alone seen one. I know guides in Africa that have been guiding for years, and they've never seen a pangolin. But for me, that's the small things. It's the small stuff that sort of brings it to the fore.
Those pangolins. Funnily enough, I was looking at my channel of choice these days is YouTube rather than TV, and I look at a lot of different nature programs. But one of the programs I was looking at last night actually had the pangolin. I mean, they're strange-looking creatures, aren't they? Really. Yeah. Incredibly well armored, and I had no idea on the size of them or really anything hugely about them. But they're fascinating creatures. I would love to see a pangolin. But again, it's not on the big five, but you can see them. You can see them in Kruger.
You can see them in Kruger if you're exceptionally lucky. You can. They do occur all around the subcontinent, and it's an animal. I mean, literally, I can't really give you probably about, let's say about 50 centimeters long, and it weighs only about 12 kilograms. Really small. I won't say strictly nocturnal, because sometimes they do come out during the daytime, particularly in the colder months. But no, it's an animal that's, it's the most trafficked animal in the world. And they say, like, when my kids become adults, that they probably will be extinct if nothing gets done to protect them. It's an animal that I just really wish people could see. But once again, if you don't have a good tracker, go back to the tracking. Who knows how to track them and wants to find them? Most people won't even know what it is. Yeah.
I'm conscious of time. We're running down to the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes. Just sort of before we finish for today, maybe you could give us an outline as to one of the, and I should have really prepped you for this, of course. But one of the best experiences that you've had, one of the best experiences that you've had in Kruger, that would come to mind. And at least we know you haven't prepared this, as in it is going to be off the top of your head. But if I was to say to you, talk us through the best experience you can think of that you've had in Kruger, talk us through it.
You have put me on the spot, yeah. There's so many. I mean, I hate to say there's just one. I've had so many amazing experiences. I've been very privileged and fortunate to have worked in the areas that I've worked and continue to work in. I've had amazing experiences, from finding 1 week old leopard cubs.
Oh wow!
To watching an elephant give birth. To it's just watching a mother and daughter. That first time on safari, we watched a herd of impala, which most people coming out on safari will go, oh, it's another impala, it's another impala. There's just so many of them. But we spent literally 4 hours with them, and they cried the entire time watching just a herd of impala. For me, that was so special. To the gentleman I mentioned earlier who was crying looking at the stars. So there's so many experiences. It really is difficult just to put down on paper and say that was the experience.
I get that. I think as well. It's true. You're in a, I suppose you're in a quite a uniquely privileged position to be able to experience the human emotions for people when they are experiencing, this kind of nature at first hand, sometimes for the first time. That must be, incredibly rewarding, actually, for you, I would have thought as well.
Absolutely, it's very rewarding. It's very humbling as well. It keeps reminding me of how lucky and how privileged I am to do what I do and travel to where I travel. I'm fully aware of it.
Yeah. Let's just before we finish off, when we're talking about the safari experiences in South Africa, we are. I mean, am I right in saying we are mainly talking about Kruger? And I suppose then my next point on that would be, how far is Kruger from Cape Town? I think a lot of times we talk about, people, obviously they want to experience Cape Town and the Cape, and the Western Cape in particular, but then they also want to experience, the wildlife side of things. What are the distances that we're talking about? And, really how easy or not is it to combine both of those?
Yeah, okay. So when we're talking about wildlife in South Africa, I think the majority of people focus in on Kruger National Park, being so well renowned. But there are a lot of other safari areas around. You've got the Northern Kalahari, just sort of a 2-hour flight in a small aircraft from Cape Town. You have the Kruger is probably about a 2.5-hour flight on a commercial jet, which gets you into the Kruger region. And then there's other areas down on the KwaZulu-Natal coast, so that if I can say the northeastern coastline of South Africa, where you've got some stunning national parks, private reserves as well. And so it all depends. I mean, from Cape Town, I would say on average, it's probably about a 2.5-hour flight around, sort of from Cape Town, any way you want to go. If you want to drive, it's a lot longer. You're looking at possibly a 1.5 to a 2-day drive to get from Cape Town to the Kruger region.
Okay, yeah, probably easier to fly. Although, is it a bad drive? I mean, I reckon it could be quite an interesting drive, actually.
It's a stunning drive. The country is so varied, and it's so diverse in its landscapes. You can cut straight through the center of the country and go through the central Karoo, which is a spectacular. It's barren. It's not almost nothing out there. There's a lot that lives out there from a smaller perspective, but it's just scenically stunning. You could drive up the garden route of South Africa, very well known drive up the garden route. Funny enough, I've just come back from that region yesterday. It is so green at the moment. The yellow canola fields are out. It's a spectacular drive to do, but I wouldn't do it straight. I would stop at certain areas and actually take it all in. So driving, absolutely, and if you're driving up that route and you wanted to get to the safari side of things, you go through the Drakensberg mountain range, which is another spectacular part of the country, which I don't feel enough people get to. You can go and visit the battlefields, the KwaZulu-Natal, the Anglo-Boer War, the Zulu-Boer War, battlefields around that area as well, which is another complete sort of side to the whole part of traveling to Africa. So either way, I mean, sometimes I think flying, yes, it's easy and it's quick, but you do miss a lot of the country that you're driving or you're traveling through. So if you have the time, I would definitely drive.
Yeah, fair play. It was interesting, actually. We've been doing a mini podcast series with a guy called Andy Brabin, who has traveled all over the world by rail. And as he's been doing it, and I haven't done a huge amount of rail travel, but as he's been talking about it and talking about the advantages of seeing the world and the land at ground level, and I've at heart I've always been a bit more on the aviation side of things, but it's really opened my eyes actually to all that you miss out at when you do fly. Actually, his number one. This guy's traveled on the train everywhere in the world, Warren. And his number one train is the Rovos Rail. Rovos Rail.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah, I was just going to mention that because.
Go on, tell our we haven't released the podcast yet.
We've got actually 2 phenomenal trains that people can travel on, and it's called the Rovos Rail is one, and the Blue Train is another, and I've been on the Rovos a few times. I've been on the Blue Train. It does. It slows you down to seeing the countryside. And, it's, if I had to have a favorite, and I must be careful maybe saying this, but, for me, the Rovos, it's more of an authentic, beautiful, old school, 19 sort of 30s, 40s kind of feel that you get to it. And it doesn't only go through Southern Africa, it goes all the way around Africa. It goes up to East Africa if you want to do a journey. So you can literally go from Cape Town all the way to Mombasa in Kenya on the Rovos Rail. And I think they've actually opened up a route now that goes from east to west. So you can go from Mombasa all the way to the coast on the west coast of Africa. And I love trains. I love that train, to be honest. It's spectacular. You sit back, they've got a beautiful lounge cart at the back there. And I could sit there all day just watching the world go past, because that's what it is. Driving, it takes the stress out of driving away, because when you're driving, obviously, if you're driving, you're not really looking too much at the scenery, unless you stop and you look around. But being in a train, I couldn't agree with you more. It's something that I think is phenomenal, and to be able to do the Rovos or the Blue Train in South Africa is something that I would recommend to most people to try and do.
Yeah, it's firmly on my bucket list. I can assure you of that. One day, Warren, I'll be there. And I believe there's Andy was telling me there's like a terrace on the train as well, which is like an open terrace where you can have a few sundowners in the open air, surrounded by nature. I mean, I was just thinking, God, this is rail travel. This is the way it should be, hey?
They've revolutionized it, I think, because they have the very last carriage is half enclosed and half outside, and literally you open the sliding doors, you walk outside, and you're at the back of the train, and people just sit there for hours and hours and hours. They've got gin and tonic in hand or a glass of wine in hand, and they're just watching the world go past. It is something that is really, really special to do.
Fair play. Yep, another one on the list. Well, listen, I think that's all we've got time for this particular episode, Warren. Thank you so much for giving us your insights, which has been wonderful. We've learned an awful lot today, and of course we've got more to come next week. We're going to be talking next week about Botswana. Give us a taste. What does Botswana have to offer in the low season? And it looks very, very different to what we've been talking about in South Africa, right?
It is very, very, very different. There's so many parts to Botswana, and that's the other side of it, which is great. A lot of people focus strictly on the Okavango Delta, and it's definitely a place that I would recommend everyone go and see. And but there's a lot more. You got the Magadi salt pans, which is the remnants of an ancient super lake. That's during the low season gets a phenomenal zebra migration that goes through it. To the Central Kalahari Game Reserve. And when you talk about small things, small animals, it's a fantastic place to go. I mean, you got meerkats, brown hyena, aardvark or pangolin. These small animals that you don't typically see when you get to the larger reserves, because most people are focused on, as you call it, the big animals and the big five. And it's something that there's a lot to offer. It really is. It's got some wild areas up on the northern part. Wetlands, deserts. There's a smorgasbord of stuff to do. It really is.
Fair play. Well, we're looking forward to that. So that's next Monday at the same time. But until then, huge thanks to you, Warren, and of course, thanks again to Africa Rome for their sponsorship of this show. And we'll look forward to catching up with you next week for Botswana. Really looking forward to finding out more, Warren. But until then, have a great week. And thanks again.
Jeffrey.
Thanks a million, man.
Thank you. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So there we go. That's it for today's show, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our very first Facebook Live. Please let us know in the comments if you've enjoyed the show today. If you've got any questions for Warren about South Africa or indeed about Botswana ahead of next week's show, then please do send them through on the Facebook group and we'll get through as many questions as we possibly can. But until then, that's all for us this week. Thanks a million for your time. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your company, and we'll see you next Monday. Take care.